Welcome everybody to this. This is the second event of our series of geopolitical debates that we organize with the Institute for European Policy Making at Bocconi and with Le Grand Continent and with our friends of EGEA who are hosting us. And the idea of this series of events is to discuss major geopolitical issues from a European perspective. Maybe you're not all familiar with what the YEP is. The idea is that we try to create a bridge between academia and the policy debate. So we are trying to help academics to think in policy terms and to help policymakers to know what is going on with academia and what they can get from not only economics professor, because the YEP is multidisciplinary. It's not only economics. There are political scientists, data scientists, and many other people with different backgrounds. So this idea of this format is coming from what Le Grand Continent has experienced in Paris, in Rome, in Madrid. The idea is to put together people with different backgrounds and to ask them to discuss on something really relevant with completely different perspective. Just to have to learn something new and to get out with new ideas and maybe different perspectives on the same topic. So I introduce our speakers. On my left, Bill Emmott. He used to be editor-in-chief of The Economist in a very challenging moment when he had some really important cover about Berlusconi. You all remember that Berlusconi is unfit to lead Italy. That it was the opportunity for Bill to start to know our country much better, and he will discuss with us about disinformation and misinformation like all the other speakers. Gloria Origi, she's a philosopher. She's based in Paris at I always don't remember the exact, CNRS, which is a research institute in Paris. And she has just published for EGEA Caccia alla Verità, Hunting for the Truth, which is a super interesting book about something that is not obvious for today, because when you discuss disinformation and misinformation, you assume that there is something which is, the truth, which is real news, proper news, and this is not obvious. That's the subject of the book. Stefano Da Empoli, he chairs ICOM, which is a very well-known think tank based in Rome about competition and information and everything which is between digital media and what companies do with this, with the media, with the data, and with technology. He has just published The Economics of ChatGPT for EGEA, which is super interesting and very challenging book because he wrote in real time while things were developing, which is super helpful to understand what ChatGPT is, or what we understand of ChatGPT, and many other interesting topics. And we are all worried about disinformation boosted by new technology, by artificial intelligence. Matteo Pugliese has totally different background. He comes from Barcelona, University of Barcelona, and he's how to describe it, like something between military and strategic analyst. He has specialized in the last couple of years about disinformation related to Russia and Ukraine. He has spent some, he has traveled very much in Ukraine. He spent some time with the Ukrainian army, and he has studied the war from both the traditionally military perspective and the disinformation perspective. And now he's quite, how to say, controversial on Twitter because he has published many analyses about how Italian media has been infiltrated by Russian propaganda. And his analysis has been quoted by Foreign Policy and other media. So let's start our discussion. We have 1 hour. I hope we have time for Q&A. If we don't have time, we can continue the conversation with an aperitif and the spritz afterwards when the bookshop closes. So I would like to start with Bill. Just to remember, this conversation is recorded. We are live streamed online. I would start with Bill. You studied Italy and the European debate at the time of Berlusconi, where we were facing a totally different kind of disinformation or misinformation. Are you more worried now than 20 years ago about the quality of the public debate? I was surprised to see that, for example, in the last World Economic Forum in Davos, I think they surveyed 1,500 business leaders, political leaders, and they mentioned disinformation as misinformation as the most relevant threat with a 2-year horizon. I mean, we are in the middle of a couple of wars, and they were worried about disinformation and misinformation. Is it they were too worried? I mean, we have experienced something worse with at the time of tycoons. We have come from, I mean, Rupert Murdoch has been with us forever, so we are familiar with how media can be manipulated to reach some political goals. So is it worse now? Are you worried about European elections?
So my feeling, I think you ask exactly the right question. I think my proper answer would be that I'm worried, but in new ways. And this is a constant. And we should not be spooked by the technological element of it, which others on the panel will be more expert about than I am. But frankly, some things are constant. One, television interviewers, and you've been a television man, one of their principles is they're sitting a politician in front of them. Their first mental idea is, why is this liar lying to me? Because politicians tell lies. So misinformation is integral to the whole process of public debate. Secondly, in an election, although we like to think that an election will be debated and so forth about detailed policies and specifics, but in the end, elections are about a battle between fear and hope, in a way. And the problem of any election is that you can stir up fear with all sorts of misleading information. The good news, I would say, is that the technology works well both for the attackers and the defenders. Recently in London, the Conservative Party, the governing party of my country, released an advertisement for the election campaign for the mayor of London, the new mayor of London. And in this video advertisement against the current mayor, who's a Labour mayor, a Muslim mayor, in the advertisement, they tried to stir up fear by saying that now there was a crime problem in London and that people were afraid to travel on the underground railway, on the metro. And they showed a video in this of people running away from a crime.
Just because the mayor is Muslim.
Is Muslim and he's soft on crime and the Islamists are taking over. Within one day, possibly within a few hours, it was detected that this video actually included footage from New York, from the Bronx. And the people running away were Americans. So quickly, this was shown to be a fake. Now, maybe we can't always rely on the incompetence of fakers, but nevertheless, it tells me that this is constant. So what is new, we should ask ourselves. I think one thing that is new is the change of the media landscape and the way in which people receive information. It is more fragmented. Mm-hmm. People are receiving information more in their bubble, their silo, their friends, and particularly social media, compared with a situation in the past where the media came through more predictable channels. And I think that is a fundamental change. And secondly, thanks to technology, sometimes messages that are true or even maybe just half true can be reinforced incredibly powerfully. So, the Russian disinformation, it seems to me as an amateur, a lot of the power of it is the power of repetition through the use of technology and fake accounts and really using it almost like a machine gunning process. But that can be countered to some extent. So I feel that this is an eternal phenomenon. Radio was a powerful disinformation source. But what we have to do is keep focusing on what is new, and I think what is new is the nature of the media environment through which people receive information, and those who wish to respond to it, which is obviously partly government, partly it is media whose business model and intellectual model depends on being trusted rather than seen as fake, need to then respond to what is new.
That's interesting and quite scaring in a way, but I wonder whether Stefano da Empoli agrees with you or not. I mean, is technology something truly different in this election? So do you think that with the AI, the worst part of what Bill was saying is becoming more worrying or not? I mean, and that's something interesting what Bill was saying, that you can use technology on both sides. Do you think that we are equipped to use in a more effective way than Malian agents or like Russian agents are? What do you think about it?
I'm worried. I think in my book I said that I mean I talked about what I say false fears and real risks about AI. False fears for me are the kind of I mean idea that AI we can lose control of AI, or I mean AI can make us slaves and whatever. I mean all these things that, in my opinion, are not real fears. While disinformation and especially the particular fact that generative AI can impersonate people in a way that was totally unprecedented, is totally unprecedented.
Yeah, we had an experience with like fake phone calls by Joe Biden and saying
I think because everyone thinks of videos, and I mean this is of course something we know that it's possible. I mean with Sora or I mean other means to have a video that look very, very realistic. But audio is according to the to many experts in disinformation, is probably even worse. I mean, we know now, I mean, these weeks, that OpenAI is experimenting this new tool. Basically, you give a text, you give 15 seconds of an audio. I mean, could be some of us, and they can apparently. I mean, it's still experimenting. I mean, this is the tool. They can apparently they can customize very well the voice. I mean, with this 15, and so it seems totally realistic. So the potential is very strong for two reasons. First one, as I said, the capacity of impersonating people and in a very I mean, realistic way, and secondly, the capacity of the ease of production and propagation of contents, and also the cost associated with that is very low. I mean, it's very easy to do that with an impressive amount of content generated by AI, and so the sum of these two factors is very worrying. I think in the medium term, I totally believe that I mean, artificial intelligence plays offense, but also defense. So we can defend ourselves thanks to the AI. I'm not sure that we are. I mean, thinking of European elections in 2 months.
We're not ready.
I mean, I'm not sure we are totally ready. I hope that I mean, Russian trolls or I mean, any kind of trolls are not readier than us. We know. I mean. fortunately, we have some rules in place that in the past we didn't have. Think of DSA, Digital Services Act, for Europe, for us, a European citizen.
Do you think this is a game changer, that the DSA
the idea for large platforms to be sanctioned until 6% of their revenues, I mean, it's a big...
Even if I'm a little, I don't want to interrupt you too much, but I'm a little bit skeptical on this, because I saw that the first reaction of platform was to deprioritize political content. So the idea is that since we cannot control political content, we don't want to take responsibility, we just make them less visible, which I'm not sure is an improvement.
Yeah, but I see different reactions from platforms. I'm more worried, I have to say, from some of them, like X. I mean, I saw data. I mean, the X doesn't have content moderators in 17 European languages. That worries me. Of course, artificial intelligence improves also translation and so on, but not having, I mean, content moderators, I think, is a worrying fact. And for sure, there are still, I mean, room for maneuver, I mean, to improve the reaction to this to disinformation and for every platform, basically. But still, I mean, the idea, I mean, it's difficult to imagine operations so large, I mean, without any reaction from platforms, or at least some of these platforms.
Okay.
I mean, risking, I think, a lot of money, I mean, in terms of sanctions and so on. So this is my little hope. Then, of course,
your hope that the new
we
regulation
will see what is going to happen.
That's really interesting. I'm wondering whether Matteo Pugliese is more optimistic or less optimistic in terms of how we are going to deal with Russian propaganda, both on technological level, but we have seen that we are, I mean, very open to Russian propaganda, even on more traditional way, with less technological approaches than ChatGPT. I mean, Italian television has hosted many Russian operatives specialized on propaganda. So can you share with us your analysis about this, and especially if you can share, I think that the audience will appreciate that if you explain what happened after the last terrorist attack in Moscow in terms of disinformation and misinformation.
Absolutely. As the DSA was mentioned a few days ago, the European Commission just announced these guidelines for the EU elections, but also the national elections for large online platforms, including, of course, X, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and so on, for risk mitigation during the election of the spread of disinformation through AI, through deep fakes, but also, let's say, more traditional disinformation methods. I'm not sure these guidelines will be game changers, as they are not binding for the platforms. They are supposed to create crisis management teams for the elections. I'm not sure all the platforms will implement these guidelines the way the European Commission wants them to do. But as you were saying, for the operations that the Russian apparatus from the intelligence services launched, especially on X 2 weeks ago now, it was basically the first time that Russia implemented this campaign specifically against Italy in that way, with this sort of storm of bots in Italian language. as well as in other languages from European countries, because it was targeting different European countries, including Italy. And it was the first time that they were trying to target the Italian audience with this storm of bots in what is called a coordinated inauthentic behavior. So this sort of way to generate a high traffic of a volume of tweets and interactions for what? To basically send users from X to the website Il Corrispondente, which is a website managed by an Italian based in Moscow, Amedeo Vondet, who we already know because he was behind the news and the article regarding the killing of the Russian pilot in Spain. And he took responsibility for the article blaming Ukraine about the terrorist attack that happened in Moscow. And all these tweets in Italian were redirecting to this article. So this was a very well-organized operation, not just against Italy, but in the particular case of Italy, there was this connection with the website. And I'm afraid that in the coming weeks and months, we will see more and more of these attempts to try to influence the public opinion with these false narratives. We just a few days ago, last week, there was a case in France regarding the website of the Defense Ministry. They basically cloned the website of the Defense Ministry, and the fake one was saying that France was recruiting 200,000 French soldiers to fight in Ukraine, obviously to create panic or at least some reactions in the French public opinion. And they just did it, the same thing 1 year ago with the French Foreign Ministry, who was saying, they announced in the fake website they were introducing a tax to finance the weapons to be sent to Ukraine, again to create this sort of negative sentiment towards the support to Ukraine. And the difference between France and Italy, the main difference that I see is that since 2021, they implemented an agency specifically mandated to basically counter disinformation, monitor disinformation. It's called Viginum, and it's quite effective. They unmasked many sophisticated operations.
This is always important to remember that it's not the Minister of Truth, so they're not pretending to tell what the truth is. That's Gloria's job.
Absolutely. They have no censorship power, no power to limit what is online. They just report, monitor, and inform the government about these operations. And in Italy, there is nothing such as Viginum, or, for example, in Sweden, they have a similar agency under the Defense Ministry. It's called the Psychological Defense Agency. I can already imagine that in Italy, an agency called like that would be
they
seen
would not
as
be very popular.
Yeah, but in any case, Senator Enrico Borghi presented a bill to establish in Italy an agency to do what Viginum is doing in France. I'm not sure it will be passed, because we know the reality of the Italian parliament and the positions and stance of the major political parties, but at least it's important we start to talk about this.
Yeah, I mean, my comment is that if you ask politicians to introduce an agency that, I mean, to fight propaganda, that would be, I mean, dealing with their own business model, so that would be tough. Now, Gloria, the big question that we are not dealing with yet is, are these misinformation efforts effective? How do they work with us? Because we are assuming that there is something that is real, like true information, something we can be sure of, and something which is like fake news. In your book, you say that this distinction is not as obvious as it might be. I mean, because we're not in Ukraine. We don't know what is happening in Ukraine. How do we know what's going on in Ukraine? How do we know what is going on in Gaza? And I mean, this sounds like a silly question, but it's not a silly question, because there are not. Can we trust journalists? What is the truth that we are trying to protect from misinformation and disinformation?
Well, I agree with what you said about the fact that there was not a golden era of truth in which people had an easy access or about how things were in the world. Take the First World War, the period in which propaganda was invented. I mean, I don't know, United States newspapers had to inform Americans about what was happening, I don't know, in Turkey or in Poland or in France. I mean, these were very far away places for Americans, and they don't even know where they were. Didn't even know where they were on the map. I mean, so I totally agree with you that false information, misinformation is not new. But I see your question. I mean, in a sense, the point of the book, and in general, my point on this debate is that actually, if misinformation comes in many different ways and nuances. It's not just like a fake news on one side and truth on the other side. It's not like that. When, for example, we had the experience a few days ago of the website Voice of Europe, which was shut down, and it was a website of propaganda, basically Russian propaganda, paid by this Ukrainian billionaire, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Medvedchuk, something like that. You're better than I in remembering names. And actually, for example, one of the propaganda of these websites was, well, if you pay Ukraine, you pay for the weapons in Ukraine, you pay a lot of money, and there will not be any money left for healthcare in your country. So it's a bad idea. This is not fake news. It's not just a news like, I don't know, the Paris Hôtel Dieu hospital has shut down because it didn't have funds, because all the funds were sent to Ukraine. No, this is an hypothesis. This is a sort of macroeconomic hypothesis. If you invest more in weapons, you have less for other kind of social investments. So, would you, I don't know, shut down any information of this kind, or is it a point of view? Is it an opinion, or is it a fake news? So, I think that as other people have said in this panel, I mean, the risk of the sort of platonic fake news, the prototypical fake news, like now we have one in France that I adored about Brigitte Macron is a man. I mean, everybody's talking about the fact that, and there are pictures and I think, and I'm almost persuaded that she's a man because they are so well done. I mean, it's so well crafted. And so these kind of things don't go very far. People just debunk this crap. I mean, in the end, I mean, we in Italy, we say, le bugie hanno le gambe corte. Lies have short legs. I mean, you don't go very far. I mean, because, I mean, the counter evidence is too much. And actually, the examples that you both have given, I mean, show that, I mean, where do you want to go with really crappy stuff? I mean, at a certain point, you have, I don't know, journalists or special services or the platform themselves that just debunk this. The most difficult thing is general propaganda, so creating, and that was the genius idea that your cousin Giuliano da Empoli has so well reconstructed in his books, the genius idea of Putin. I mean, just really create a counter-narrative which is made of maybe some sort of crappy evidence, but basically on another view of the world. Yeah. I mean, another view of the world. It is true that if you spend too much for weapons, I mean, I'm a pacifist, I come from a certain tradition. I don't like the fact that we are spending so much in weapons, but I understand that there is an emergency and we have to but I mean, it's an argument that it is perfectly sound, I mean, in a sense. I mean, the money of a state is not unlimited. So that is the idea. I mean, I would like to avoid all this sort of bipolar discourse in which there is the truth on one hand and fake news. There are some fake news which are totally crappy, that are almost interesting and funny. I mean, Brigitte Macron as a man is super. I mean, you cannot stop watching videos, but I don't believe it, but I watch the video and I'm super happy to watch the video. So, and then there are counter narratives which are packed to and go with a certain form of evidence that can have a much worse impact, and they are much more difficult to debunk, to contain.
That's interesting. I'm worried that, and I go back to Bill, if we rely on traditional media to debunk fake news or to foster a proper public debate in terms of having a rational conversation about serious matter, I think that we cannot sleep very well by night. I mean, that's my impression, that at least in Italy, mainstream media have no money, no people, no technology that are fit to deal with the issue they're supposed to supervise on. Do you think that media, legacy media like The Economist, like Financial Times, they can be useful and effective to prevent that the debate go in the wrong direction, that people spend too much time discussing whether Brigitte Macron is a man or discussing fake news that are just a product of propaganda? What do you think about our fellow colleagues, journalists?
Well, I suppose my first reaction is that I don't like the phrase traditional media or legacy media.
But that's what they are.
It makes it.
We can say old media, but that's old-fashioned media.
I especially don't like the word old.
Yeah, no. I know.
But what do you mean is media? What is the distinction between Politico and the Washington Post? One is legacy media, one is new media.
But maybe
they are doing the same thing.
Yeah, but there are 100 of Instagram accounts, TikTok debunker.
Well, that's a different point. That's a different point. So this is what I was trying to express, that we have a different media environment now. In other words, taking media with a small m, the flow of information is much more like a huge river that is everywhere, and like business organized media, commercial media, and of course publicly funded media are now a smaller proportion of the flow of information than was true 20 years ago or 40 years ago. And so that's the new element. It can be used in old ways, as you say. I mean, and of course recently, just to go back to a national tragedy, in the Brexit referendum, the debate was exactly about if you don't spend this money
for Europe,
and it was put on the side of a bus. Yeah. Why are we sending 350 million pounds to Europe? We should be spending it on our health service. So it's exactly the same, but it was on a rather legacy media, namely a bus and a Pullman, basically. Yeah. So there's no new techniques, but it's definitely the flow of information is much broader than it used to be. So the number of participants, I would say, in the battle for credibility and trust is wider than it used to be. So what you call the traditional media
But why,
is a smaller proportion of that.
You were
than it used to
mentioning
be.
Brexit. Why the rational discourse didn't make it during the Brexit campaign? Why it was so difficult to present sound and data-driven arguments, and they were so ineffective in shaping the debate?
Maybe the positive way to say is
and this has not changed. I mean, many years afterwards, the public discussion has not changed that much from 2016.
Well, you could say the public vote in 2016 was 52% to leave, 48% to remain. The opinion polls now say something like 58% to rejoin, or it was a bad idea to leave, and something around 40-something% say, I'm glad we left. So actually it has 7 years of data have changed things. But why was it difficult? Because I think it was a decision being made more about emotions than about rational scrutiny of data. And the reality is that most elections are about emotions more than about the data. So the fundamental starting point, the problem for that referendum, in my view, was that the British emotion was somewhat skeptical beginning in 1973 when we joined about Europe. So in other words, the mistake in assessing that election was the belief that the cautious voter would choose to stay with the status quo and stay in, and it would be the risk-taking voter who would leave. Actually, it turned out to be something the other way around. I don't know which way to vote. A lot of people said, I don't really understand, but I don't trust those foreigners, therefore I'll vote to leave. So, but it was an emotional vote. Let me come back to a more recent example, maybe that perhaps can be contribute to the debate, about how in an environment where the audience is perhaps sensitized or very aware of the issues because of their circumstance, actually it's possible to counter propaganda and disinformation. And that example is Taiwan.
Okay.
Taiwan election, January this year, surprisingly, in purely emotional and political terms, the winner was from the same party as the incumbent, despite all sorts of economic complaints, all sorts of feeling tired of this government and so forth. And yet there's no question but that the Chinese system has been throwing propaganda at it. So why did that fail to get, as it were, a president that the Chinese would have preferred and Brexit succeed? I'd say because the Taiwanese population, because of the situation they've been in throughout their lives, are more sensitized to the situation. And there are more organizations, some of them government, some of them traditional media, some of them universities, some of them non-profit organizations that are dedicated to, they're on a war footing to try to detect disinformation and bots and so forth quickly and provide some information about it. So, and the trouble with the European elections is that in a European election, the public is not sensitized because it's in a way marginal to their day-to-day thinking. It's not even the government of their city or the government of their country. It's something elsewhere. So in a way, it's open to that kind of influence because actually the public is not very aware or it actually doesn't care very much. So it can make a decision on a very emotional basis. So I think our question is, how do you deal with a situation when the public is not sensitized, or how do you sensitize the public to think, to be worried about misinformation. Because the ultimate danger of disinformation, the ultimate worry to me is that is a public who end up trusting nothing. And it's utter, total doubt about information. And that is the objective of Putin and people like him. It's not to convince with this argument versus that, it's to make you doubt everything. And I'm afraid I want them to still believe me.
Yeah. That was the strategy of Steve Bannon, flooding the zone with, I mean...
Flooding it with shit, as he put it. Yes, exactly.
I
it didn't
want
matter.
to say.
I apologize.
You said it.
But that was his phrase, wasn't it?
That was the phrase. I mean,
yes.
That was the idea. And that was the idea. There are just invading the space with crappy stuff, and people won't believe anything anymore. It will become...
Just that was my experience when I spent a few days in Moscow a few years ago for a journalism class at Sputnik, which is like the leading Russian propaganda media. That was their approach. I mean, they hire journalists who used to work for Financial Times, Bloomberg, I mean, international media, so that they can understand how international media works, and using our liabilities against us, because their message was, you said that you are balanced, that you want to present different perspective, that you're not biased. So if we say that Ukrainian people use nuclear weapons, you have to report our narrative at the same level as what the CIA or what the State Department says. So they are using our Western approach against us, because, and if you do not report their perspective, they're saying that you are biased.
Yes.
And when you say that yet their narrative is fake, they say, how can you say that? That's just our point of view on international relations. I don't know, maybe, Matteo, if you want to say something more about this idea of introducing doubt in our public space.
Absolutely. Actually, exploiting the Western weaknesses is a key point in the strategy of Russian propaganda. And the fact that the idea that Putin doesn't want to convince the Western audience about his version, but just to make them doubt about anything, is strictly related, in my view, with the historical tradition in the Soviet Union and then in Russia about conspiracy theories, which are pretty much connected also with the propaganda streams that now the Russian agents and Russian media are trying to spread in Europe, because many of the strategic narratives are connected to conspiracy theories, and sometimes you cannot even distinguish the two things. And actually, before, I didn't completely answer your question regarding the whole strategy that Russia is implementing on Europe and the West for propaganda disinformation, because I talked about the digital sphere, but as you said, there also a strong effort in the traditional, let's say, media, starting from the TV shows. My research published last year counted that just in the first 4 months of the invasion of Ukraine, 21 Russian propagandists, I mean Russian nationals directly connected to the regime, so state media, MFA, and so on, who were hosted at least 67 times by Italian TV shows to spread the strategic narratives of the Kremlin, especially by private TV channels, two in particular, one from Berlusconi's network and one, La Sette, it's another private channel. But they are going beyond that. An example which is still connected to the Soviet past, actually this strategy of interference, influence, and destabilization is at least 68 years old, because it started during the Soviet time with the so-called active measures, activные мероприятия, so the measures they used to try to influence and destabilize the Western public opinion and governments. And there is a very interesting analogy of what happened last year in October in Paris, when this couple of Moldovans drew the David stars in the I think buildings where some Jews were living. It happened exactly the same thing 6 years ago in Köln, in Germany, when a couple of neo-Nazis painted some swastikas on the synagogue in Köln, and it came out it was an operation coordinated by Eastern German Stasi and KGB. So it started that started a huge anti-Semitic campaign in Europe in 1959, 1960, and they were trying to do exactly the same operation with in Paris last year. Of course, it was immediately after the Hamas attack in Israel from Gaza. They didn't succeed this time because it was uncovered by Vigilum and by the French intelligence services. But it came out that the Russian Moldovan entrepreneur who gave the order to paint the stars was actually cooperating with the Russian intelligence service FSB. So it was an operation coordinated. And I think that during the European elections, we will see, we were talking about the fact that EU elections don't seem very concrete to European voters compared to national elections or local elections. So they will try probably to exploit national grievances related to different sectors, from the farmers, the protests of the farmers with the tractors that we saw in many countries, to the well-known, let's say, peace solution, which is basically Ukraine's surrender. And again, there is an analogy with what happened in the 80s. This peace movement that was exploited by the Soviet Union in the 1980, there was this group of former NATO generals called Generals for Peace, who in 1980 met in Sofia and decided to create this group to promote unilateral withdrawal of ballistic missiles from NATO countries towards Russia. And it came out in 2004 that this group was financed and coordinated by the KGB, and the generals didn't even know that. So they will try again to exploit the peace movement in this way, in my opinion.
That's super interesting. Usually in talk show, in TV shows, when you want to discuss something and you want to have a serious voice to deal with journalists or propaganda operatives, you invite experts. And when a TV host invite experts, they feel that they are doing their job. Something that I learned from Gloria's book, that this problem with experts is not that easy. I mean, experts are people who might be problematic, and they are not always as effective as journalists expect that they are. So I was wondering, Gloria, if you could tell us in a short version of what you explain in your book. I mean, what we learn from how experts should be managed carefully when people are reacting very emotionally, as Bill was saying, during the pandemic and during wars. I mean, if you invite Matteo on TV explaining how Russia operatives work, I'm pretty sure that half of the audience would say, oh, he's just the usual NATO guy, he's probably paid by CIA, we don't trust him.
I mean, we're living one of the most serious crises of authority in all times. I mean, this is new. This is really new because authority was important. Even in my childhood, authority was very important. In my childhood in Italy, you could vote for the communist or for the Christian Democrats, and basically the priests were the authorities to convince people to vote Christian Democrats. I remember I was in a church in my village in the countryside, and the priest was telling that communists used to come to our above our houses with snakes, and they launched the snakes in our countries. So he came back, he said to my mother, "Mommy, you know that communists are launching snakes in our garden, so we should vote a Christian Democrat and not." So that was the way. So the authorities were very clear, etc. And then the media, the university, all the system of authorities was quite hierarchical, well established, and it has been wiped out. It has been completely wiped out. So the problem is not that there are fake news. The problem is that people don't recognize exactly who are the authorities that you should trust. I mean, and if you work in a university like I do, I mean, students are like this. They tell you, we don't want to read Immanuel Kant because he was a white male, and we don't care about, and we don't want these authorities anymore, etc. So the crisis of authorities that for me depends really on the invention of internet is big everywhere. I mean, and so the problem is that people accept information that comes from inexistent authorities, anonymous websites. I don't really know who says that Brigitte Macron is a man. I mean, but still, I believe a little bit because it's so convincing. But I don't know. Usually, I mean, if I'm serious, I mean, about grasping information, I check at least where does it come from? I mean, and we don't do this, and especially young people don't do this anymore. I mean, they don't do this anymore. They don't know where the information. Wikipedia, you don't know who wrote the entry. I mean, you don't know.
Even
so,
if
so that's
Wikipedia, you are supposed to have a collective
that's a general crisis. So in a society in which we have lost completely any grasp of on which is the pyramid of authorities, how it is structured, who are the experts, etc. Experts have a very hard job to do. I mean, they can sort of they can be recruited by journalists, etc. So use the authority of the media in order to have authority, but it's not enough because you know very well that the media have certain principles, though, like balance. So if they invite an expert on climate change, they invite an expert on climate change denial, etc., which is completely crazy, etc. So it's a very. So the problem is not who are the experts, but how people today, through which structure, hierarchy of authorities, recognize who is the expert. Is it enough that he's in Harvard or she's in Harvard? Is it enough that he has been appointed by Macron for the committee against COVID, etc.? So we don't know. We don't have the authorities that legitimate the experts anymore. And this is the real problem. What just disappeared in the beginning of the 2000s is our traditional pyramid of authorities.
No, I go to Stefano D'Empoli for the last moment before opening to Q&A. I have no idea what time is it, but what time is it?
Very late.
Okay, we have just 5 minutes. So the last time, maybe we just collect a couple of questions. But I wanted to challenge Stefano on this point. Gloria said it's because of internet. I would maybe I would be more specific because of digital platforms that created this public sphere. So basically, you said before that DSA and this kind of approaches that responsabilize, that give more responsibility to digital platforms can be a part of the solution. Maybe they can become part of a problem if we ask digital platform to supervise more the content they host. So my question is, and what if Elon Musk is right, that maybe we just go to totally free speech approach, so no supervision at all, we just treat digital platforms as mobile phone companies, so they are just infrastructure, we don't ask them to do anything. Do you think that would improve or totally destroy the structure of public debate?
It's a very thorny question, of course, and digital platforms clearly displayed, a lot of embarrassment over it, because whatever they do, they make mistakes, of course, because either they choose to keep Donald Trump over Twitter or Facebook after January 6th, or as they did the platform Trump. And of course, both are debatable, and so I think they are, at the end, they realize that they need to delegate, basically, public regulation in some way. You mentioned Elon Musk. Of course, Elon Musk has different ideas, but after all, even X, at least for Europe, is under DSA, and so and there are already, some issues about it, and I think it will be interesting to see how this relation.
So you are more for supervision rather than.
But it's.
Gloria disagree.
I'm saying that at the end of the day, I think that the same platforms, some way, would prefer to delegate, because they are on some issues they realize that any decision is questionable. I mentioned Trump decision because, of course, that is the most.
But I was curious, Gloria disagrees with you.
I just want to point. Okay, we have a problem that we have elections in 2 months, so digital platforms are very important. But basically, when we talk about internet, which is an infinite space, we're talking all the time about 6 businesses which are very transit. They are going to disappear. Who is on Facebook? I am on Facebook because I'm old. My kids laugh at me. If you're serious today, you don't use X anymore. You use Blue Sky. You are on Substacks. Clearly, these things are products. These platforms are services that are going to disappear. In 10 years, who's going to talk about Facebook and TikTok and Twitter, etc.? You are economists, etc., much more than I am, a poor philosopher, but don't invest in these things. These are just.
Well, that might be disputable.
Don't put a penny in these things. People are creative, and internet is infinite. Even if they are very big, you can build. Platforms that are much bigger and much more virtuous in a sense, and I'm sure that that is what is going to happen.
This is probably true, but in the time being, of course, they have a relevance.
But in the meanwhile, if you had invested in Microsoft a couple of years ago, I think that would be quite something.
In Facebook.
Okay, maybe we have time for just a couple of very short questions. I know that probably our director, Daniel Gross, is still with us. I don't know if he wants to say something, or no, he's not. He had to leave. But I don't know if we have a couple of questions.
Thank you very much. My name is Victoria Lapp. I am a lecturer here at Bocconi. My question would be maybe, I don't know, to any of you who can respond. How should we deal with this problem? Maybe Professor Origi mentioned that. How should we deal with this idea, like the Italian TV, that we should invite experts on climate change and denials on climate change, because at the end of the day we are kind of legitimizing the views of the people which are not based on science. So this is one question, how to deal with this. Should we really invite these people who provide kind of...
You're totally right, we should, but there is an old norm of journalism which is called balance, in which you give room to an opinion and its opposite in order to have a balanced idea. But of course, I mean, you're totally right. In the case of climate change, you have 98% of the scientific community which has consensus about the fact that it is happening. And the other are crap. I mean, and so why inviting them? But I was in France during COVID. I mean, and I remember the number of, I don't know if you had it in Italy, we had a number of charlatans, doctors and experts that found the formula for, etc. That were they were on TV all the time. I mean, and that was...
so simply not invite...
Well, the norm of journalism, I would say, is you have balance and you have journalists who seek to act as authorities and to make independent investigations into the science of climate change. So you may have the devil, you may have God, but you also pay journalists. Why does anyone pay journalists?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
And maybe
I've spent 50 years trying to work this out. But if there's something gone missing, it's the independent journalist, the trusted oracle who alongside the balance tries to provide independent, objective, or at least bipartisan facts to the audience.
And maybe this another kind of question leading from this answer to Matteo Pugliese. How do you think we should deal with these people like Amedeo Avondet, who we know who are completely kind of Russian agents, I don't know, spreading propaganda, but they are still invited all the time to the Italian TV, and I think they are really damaging this country. How to deal with these people?
I mean, it's up to the TV producers and journalists to not invite figures like Avondet, but in my research, what I pointed out is that at least if you want to give space to this kind of speakers, as you would give space to climate change deniers or Holocaust deniers or COVID deniers or whatever, okay, give space to these charlatans, but at least make sure in the show or in the next episode there is some expert or some journalist fact-checking what was said and show that they were wrong.
That's something, I mean, there is some kind of technique in TV that you can do what is called like a close interview, which means that you have an interview with someone, but you are not inviting him or her in the panel with other people putting on the same level. So you have the interview and then you comment or you debunk or you analyze the interview in the newsroom with other hosts. That's something you can... I understand why a journalist wants to have an interview with this guy in Moscow, because he's the man of the day. But if you invite him as a speaker, and then you have like Matteo Pugliese and Milemo at the same level, what the audience, the message the audience receives is that he's a legitimized person, a legitimized commentator. I mean, there are some ways that you can manage these people, but what you're totally right, that the people on Italian TV, they don't think how to deal with people. They just invite, like, have as much as possible people in the panel, and then everybody's the same like
But I
the
think
others.
no,
They're trying to entertain.
Yeah.
The problem
I was
is the
saying that
instinct is
because,
entertainment.
It's not also because we were talking of balance. I think the point of view, unfortunately, it's more like entertainment than balance.
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely. I mean, Victoria didn't say it, but she's Ukraine, and so she's particularly interested in these topics.
No, but this is a big problem.
I totally agree. I totally agree.
A horrible experience when they don't give you a word, like dritto e rovescio, and then the guy who was completely kind of propagandist, he had 10 minutes, and I had 10 seconds, and nobody had an opportunity to challenge the guy.
Yeah,
This is because you're a woman, don't worry. This is it.
No, it's not only because it's like there because they were simply enforcing Russian propaganda and not even a counteraction.
Do we have time for a last question or not? I looked, Silvia Tesauro, she said yes, so we have time for last question. I saw someone who wanted to say something over there. No? No question at all? Are you sure?
Yes, no question.
No question at all. Okay, so thank you very much to our speakers. Thank you to Egea for hosting us, and I think the next event will be on May 30th May, about European elections and the geopolitical impact of European elections. So stay tuned, and please subscribe the YEP newsletter, so you will be always informed of what we are doing. Thank you very much.